Hey guys, welcome to Sketchaday. I'm Spencer. We're back and I'm excited to show you some stuff in Procreate 5 today. But before we begin, I want you to hit that subscribe button, turn on alerts, and be sure to check out my Instagram page where I post stuff typically every day. In fact, if you go to sketchaday.com, you can also sign up for my newsletter where you'll get this free super sketch tip guide, which is basically a compilation of knowledge and things that I've learned over the last few years, and it even includes a discount code and a free tutorial. So today I'm going to be using one of my brushes in Procreate using the Apple Pencil, and I'm going to be showing you my Prismacolor pencil brush. Now, when I set out to create these brushes, I wanted to replicate as much as possible the real feel of the tools I loved to use and I'm familiar with. And so Prismacolor pencil is one of those tools. But just to make it interesting, we're going to sketch an SUV today, and I'm also going to show you a technique that I use sometimes to do that. So if you don't have an iPad Pro or a tablet, that's okay. If you don't use Procreate, that's okay. There's still good stuff for you to learn here. But if you do get interested in this stuff, be sure to use the links below in the description of the video to buy those, and you'll actually help support us here at Sketchaday. So with that, let's get started. So I've got my iPad Pro here and Procreate, and if you've downloaded my brushes, they should show up in the panel here as Sketchaday. And I've got mine here. So tap on that and you can see I've got a bunch of brushes here, ballpoint, stencil, which we'll go over at some time. And if you scroll down a bit, you've got this Prismacolor. Now, if you're like me and you like to tinker or tweak things in Procreate, you can actually tap on the brush itself and you'll have a full panel here that you can use to adjust the settings for the brush, things like taper, if you want more or less taper, pressure sensitivity. You can try that out here in the brush window as well, and so forth. So just a little tip for you guys. Now, I have mine set pretty small, pretty fine, but I want to show you a couple things before we get started. For example, much like a real colored pencil, I have the ability to go thick to thin on my strokes. So thin, thick, thin. Okay. I can also tilt the brush and do shading. This also comes standard with the HB pencil in Procreate, but I did modify this ever so slightly to be a bit more approximate in texture and feel to what I'm used to drawing with. So that way I can apply some quick shading. We can adjust the size of the pencil as well if we want to adjust the size of the tip and so forth. So pretty handy if you're looking for that natural look and feel on your canvas. Okay, so I went ahead and cleared that layer, and I'm going to sketch with not quite black. I'm going to use like a deep blue here just to spice things up. And I want to show you a method that I used to sketch an SUV. Now, if I'm going to sketch a product, I want to think about how people typically see that product, because that's how I want to present the product in a familiar way. So with cars, typically you don't really show them top down or in a lowered 3/4 view, because we're not typically above our vehicles unless you're really tall. Typically there's more of a comfortable view that's relational to eye level. Similarly, you don't typically draw them above your eye level, because then it gives the sense of scale that isn't familiar. So what I mean is, oops, I did undo there, which it happens sometimes. If this is my eye level at this line, and I were to draw the bounding box or the box that would define the vehicle, right? If I draw it above the eye level, I'm going to end up with something like that. Below eye level, I may end up with something like this as the bounding box for the entire thing. And closer to eye level, something like this. Okay, so typically when I'm drawing a car, I like to use 2 instead of 1 or 3. Okay, this is the one that we want to use. All right, so that should explain how I'm going to set this up. Now I'm going to be using the box method. So as the name implies, I'm going to start by constructing things with boxes. Now, proportionally speaking, if you were looking at an SUV, you may have something like this, just as a thumbnail sketch. You may have something like this, okay? Hood, body, rear, and so forth. And you'll notice that I could divide this into a smaller box in the front and a littler box, or a bigger box, not littler. I'm going crazy today. A larger box in the back. And the wheels being positioned over the center of mass here, the engine, and the rear passenger area to give stability. Okay, something along those lines. So with that, if I keep this thumbnail in mind, let's actually just scale it down. This isn't going to be the final design or anything, but just a point of reference for you guys. So on a new layer here, I'm going to go ahead and just start by sketching in some lines that could represent my rear box. Okay, I'm going to zoom out here, like so. Okay, maybe we'll do a little bit more dynamic perspective on this, and then we can sketch in our front box, like so. Okay, and these are just going to be guides for us as we're sketching, but we may end up with something like this, okay? And just for the sake of proportionally outlining this, let's divide these boxes and draw through to the back so we can kind of see what's happening. All right, so this might indicate the structure of my design. Now, since we're working digitally, I can actually scale and position this. So I'm going to do that. And we also want to capture where we think the wheels will be. Like I said, center of mass over that engine area, and toward the back, we're also going to have a wheel here. Now, typically when we're doing a car design sketch, we don't, at least I try not to do them in a very static fashion. And right now this sketch is fairly static because everything is upright and orthogonal, or rather geometrically estimated in a way that just gives it some rigidity. I'm using all straight lines, I'm using more pure geometry, so naturally it feels rigid and stable, which might be fine for a car design sketch that is an SUV, depending on the aesthetic, but for our purposes, I want to introduce a bit of gesture. And so by gesture, I mean I want to have a bit of energy in the sketch and not have it be so static. So a couple of things we're going to do here. I'm going to go back to this layer, and I want to kind of map out, the height of the wheel wells. I'm also going to push the wheels down a bit as well. Okay, so wheel well, push the wheel down, something like that. And the wheels in car design sketches tend to be a bit oversized. So when we're doing our final sketch, you'll notice that I take a few liberties and I will make the wheels just ever so slightly bigger, okay? So let's do our final sketch here. Now to start, I like to put in like a center line, and we're gonna rake the cab back as well and taper back, just keeping it loose and fresh as we go. And for the body, we can start to just use that under sketch as a guide. Now the front, I don't want it to be so boxy, so I'm actually going to just throw in some helper lines here, and also try and start throwing in body lines that represent the shape and overall gesture of the vehicle. There's my hood line I can throw in as well. And maybe this has a profiled hood. Okay, something like that. And like we had in our under sketch, I'm going to capture the wheel well here. And we're going to capture this other boxy wheel well in the back. And we want to map out our cab like so. I'm going to rake that line back and start to build in my A pillars, my B pillar, and my C pillar on the vehicle. And by A pillar, B pillar, C pillar, I mean A being much like the alphabet at the front, B in the middle, and then C toward the rear of the vehicle. Okay. So this upper portion of the vehicle is called the greenhouse or cab. And proportionally, if you're struggling with how to map this out, I would suggest taking some pictures of cars and using the wheel of a car as the unit of measurement, and you'll be able to see kind of how this works in terms of the proportionality of the vehicle. Now, vehicles are tough because as soon as you put a face on a vehicle, people tend to say, "Oh, it looks like this," or "It looks like that." So it's always a little challenging, but we're just keeping this sketch nice and loose, similar to what I would do with a pencil. If we want to sharpen the pencil, you can reduce the size of the brush. Okay, and let's adjust the opacity of my guide layer here. 2-finger tap on that layer, and now I can, let's do this again. Tap on my layers, 2-finger tap, like so, and now I can slide this to the left or to the right to make that layer more or less opaque so that I can focus on the final design. So like I mentioned in the final sketch, I'm going to do this on a separate layer just because wheels are kind of hard and I'm not using tools. There is a way to do this in Procreate, but I am doing it the hard way, and I'll show you. So if I want to draw an ellipse in Procreate, here's the trick. You draw an ellipse and you hold, and Procreate will snap and allow you to place that ellipse. So for my initial sketch lines, I tend to not like using those tools, but I'll come back in if I need to clean up and then use that tool. Okay, so there's my initial sketch line. So now I can come in, draw an ellipse, and then place it where I want. Same thing again. Place it where I want. If I need to edit the shape, I can tap Edit Shape. Now I can actually move this and position it where I need to, where those lines need to be. Okay, so there's a way to do it. You might be wondering, oh, why is the wheel pointing this way when the perspective line's pointing that way? If the wheel's turning, you're going to have a different axis, but it's also easy to correct because I can just make a selection here. Oops, let's make a selection. Or just hit transform actually, since it's on its own layer. And now I can rotate it into position where I want it to be, where it feels a little less, shall we say, cheating of the rules of perspective and so forth. All right, so now I'm gonna finish out this bumper area, and I have this design where the bumper kind of wraps into the wheel well. So that's something I'd probably have to resolve through a few sketches, but we're gonna roll with it for now. Keep it as is. This front well, I'm going to modify. So just erase a little bit here. And by modify, I mean I just needed to angle it in just a bit, like so. So now I have the front end kind of worked in. Rocker panel, guard if you need that. And let's get our back wheel well. I'm going to modify this slightly and extend the wheelbase. Let's merge these down. So I'm just going to modify this because if I have a door here, there's really not much room for a door on the back, right? So I want to push this wheel back, or at least make that wheel well just a little bit narrower so that it feels like, oh, there actually could be some sort of wheel there. And then for the rims themselves, you can do a bunch of different things. With cars, I like to keep my spokes fairly thick. With trucks, you can start to introduce additional elements as you want, or as are necessary, rather. And like I said, if you need to sharpen your pencil, just reduce the size and then come in and you can crisp up those lines as needed with our Prismacolor pencil as part of my brush pack. So if you do want to try that out, go to sketchday.com/store and you'll be able to check out those brushes. Okay. I actually think something's a little bit off with the pressure sensitivity on my tablet, but we're going to work with it. So as far as shading goes, much like I would with a regular pencil, it's about pressure, speed, angle of the tool, and proximity of those lines to each other. That's going to give us the tones that we're after, or shades. Okay, so again, I designed this in a way that would respect how I like to use my tools. And so the idea being, I can pick up this Apple Pencil and I'm able to then just jump right in and not worry too much about whether the pencil will feel like a pencil and look like a pencil. And the same goes for the marker brush and ballpoint brush that I have as part of my brush pack. Okay, same thing. We're gonna crisp this up a little bit, add some shading, finish out our wheels, and just as we go, tighten up some of these details. Okay, and the cool thing about digital too, you can always zoom in. So we can zoom in, shade things in. I don't want to spend too much time on this drawing, but here, for example, you can see that with zooming in and drawing a little bigger, actually gives you more control over what you're doing. So we can come in, much like on paper, the bigger you draw, the more accurate, or not more accurate, but the better your drawing will be, as opposed to drawing small. When you draw really small, you can capture the gesture and intent of the designs, but it's really hard to work on the details when you're so far out. Like I can zoom in here on the corner, for example, and work on things like reflections if I want. So that now when I zoom out, it really does look like something reflective. I'm just realizing my SUV looks kind of like a pig, but that's okay. I don't know how many of you have seen Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, but Spider Pig's in it. Spoiler alert, and it's pretty awesome. So check it out. I guess it's not really a spoiler alert if you say what happens anyways. Maybe I should put that in the description of the video. Okay, so hopefully you can kind of see what I'm doing here, just working on some shading, details, zooming in as necessary, adjusting the brush size, and so forth. And we're able to get a pretty decent approximation of what real pencil might look like using the iPad Pro, which is pretty impressive and frankly game-changing, because when I was learning to draw, it was all about, the real tool and the real deal at all times. And that's not to say mastery of real tools is no longer important. I think it is. But it's really cool that no matter where I go, I have this tablet and app that can give me fairly good approximations of the real tools I love to use and that I was fortunate to train with. So if you're interested, again, check them out on my store and you can find them there. But a lot of this moving forward on this particular sketch is really just about capturing details and making sure that your shading and lines are cleaned up as you go. For the inside, I'm not going to focus too much on capturing all the details inside, but we'll just come back, clean up some of these lines as needed. Again, pressure, angle, all the same things you might be paying attention to if you were using the real tool. That's what I'm doing here as I shade in some of these areas and elements and clean up details on this design. So hopefully you can kind of see how that works and how, as we add a bit of line weight, things are starting to be pulled up to the foreground on the sketch. All right, so that's the box method. Another thing I do sometimes with a sketch when either I'm short on time or it's not really necessary to hammer out all the details is really just to focus on kind of this front 3/4 portion of the sketch, because that's what's closest to the viewer. And if you focus on cleaning up the details and adding a higher degree of fidelity up front as opposed to the back, it actually feeds into the concept of perspective, where things up close have a higher degree of detail and fidelity and saturation and so forth than things that are further away. So by spending a little bit more time cleaning things up, it actually reinforces the perspective in the drawing by virtue of how finished it is up front as opposed to the back. So that's something you can do in your sketches to further reinforce your perspective. So on the rims, I'm just adding a little bit of a coarse shadow or reflection almost. I'm not really doing the lugs here, but just focusing on, showing some depth and capturing that these upper surfaces are more lit than the surfaces that are falling away from view. And that's being all being done with proper shading on the pencil. And now you can see, zooming out, there's the detail that we were trying to capture. And with cars, you're going to get, depending on where it is, you're going to get these reflections happening wherever there are surface undulations or changes. As far as how to do that, I suggest you just open your eyes, look around, and try and understand and see the forms and what's happening, with the reflections on a car, and then try and mimic that as you go. And you'll be able to kind of pick up on those patterns and symbols, frankly, because sketching, a lot of it is about representing symbolically what we see in real life in a way that is accurate enough to convey to the viewer that this object or this thing is what we're saying it is. Hopefully that sentence made sense. It's a complicated one, but basically I'm just saying, whenever you draw, you want to make sure that it seems realistic, but it doesn't have to be perfect, because realism is going to happen if we are just respecting the patterns that people are accustomed to seeing when we draw. Okay, now I've moved to the back, which I promised I wouldn't do, or said I wouldn't do, but here we are anyways. But just a light touch, and then I'll move away and kind of get a little bit of the top here. Clean up our outline with some heavier pressure strokes, so forth. Again, because this is a pencil, we can come in, shade lightly, and we can even go over that shading again and kind of build up that value that we're after, okay? Pretty handy if you're used to working light until you get it right, or you're just trying to rough something out because you're in doubt. And it looks like I've put a couple marks on the screen, so I'm going to erase those, come back to my drawing. If you're having trouble with that using the iPad Pro or a tablet that has an active stylus, meaning powered and detected by the operating system as it's trying to detect your palm and tell the difference, you just want to make sure that the stylus is far enough away from the screen that it's not impacting that detection. Okay, and that's going to help you avoid those errant strokes. All right, so kind of at the finish line here, we're just going to clean this up a little bit more. And then on the hood, I'm going to do just a little bit of shading. Okay. Actually, I don't like that line, so I'm just going to do a little shading here. And then we'll turn off the layer below so you can see what the finished thing looks like. And you guys can tell me if it looks anything like pencil or if it doesn't. Unlike the last video, I didn't do a pencil drawing first, unfortunately. So you'll just have to take my word for it, I guess. And just kind of compare with, perhaps another pencil drawing that you've seen or some pencil strokes that you've made yourself on your drawings. All right. Okay, so let's turn off layer 4. And there you'll see we have our drawing of an SUV. There's probably a bit more I could do here, like cleaning up some of these pencil lines toward the back, maybe adding some indication of a seat. We could even shade in this B pillar and a portion of the window just to show that there is perhaps a reflection or something happening in the glass itself. Okay, since it's an all pencil drawing, don't want it to get too muddy and too heavy. So I'm going to keep it fairly fresh on the windshield. I'm just going to turn the pencil on the side, on the top as well, like so. Maybe a little bit on the hood and so forth to give this SUV just a bit of shading and finish tone. But as you can see, holding the pencil like I am, I'm able to kind of quickly give some gradation and tone. It really feels natural, and it's pretty amazing that we've come this far, because it really truly does feel like using a pencil, especially if you have like a screen protector on your screen. It really does give you that feeling that you are using a real pencil. So again, if you're curious and want to try, links will be in the video description. You can scroll through those, and that way, if you do buy, you are supporting what we do here at Sketchaday, and that would be greatly appreciated. All right, so I think we're gonna wrap it now. In 3, 2, just kidding, I have to erase some stuff and fix it. Like so, 1. Okay, so that's my sketch of an SUV using my pencil created for Procreate. You're welcome to try that out and check it out. The link is sketchaday.com/store. Just navigate to the Procreate brushes. You'll see the icon. You can download and install them and let me know what you think. In fact, if you use the discount code FIRSTTIMER, which I'm including in this video and in the description, you'll get a small discount on your purchase to help ease that a bit. And I'd love to get any feedback you have and hear what your thoughts are. Thanks so much for watching. If this is your first time, be sure to hit that subscribe button, turn on alerts. Even if it's not your first time, if you don't turn on alerts, you won't even know when I post. That's how YouTube works. be sure to come say hi on Instagram and sign up for my newsletter at sketchaday.com. Well, thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time right here on Sketchaday.